Good evening, all. Am I audible? Cool. I greet you all in the wonderful name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And I would like to take this opportunity to welcome all to this week's Sabbath welcoming service under the theme, The Rich Young Ruler. Trust you all had a good week. To start this service, we shall ask Brother Skundla. Brother Skundla, can you please give us a word of prayer to open this service? Elder Skundla, sorry.
Same thing. Let's close our eyes in prayer. Bolunglezo kazile Nkosi ngoba nathi ngelithuba lanamhlanje Nkosi ba ngosithwala kule veki. Kuze mlosuvele ngosigcina nosuneza emakhayeni ngelithuba. As we will start this program bolungleyo bakunye nathi mzali and help us to learn a little ngawe. Kwenzela ukuthi bawugqibeleni sisifumane sikunye nawe. Be with the presenter of the day, protect him, Lord, and his family. We pray this now in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Okay. Just by way of introduction, our speaker for today is Brother Xolani Sithole. He's originally from Mnambiti. He's a member of the TOC Stewardship Committee, member of the Sentin Metro SDA Church. He's the convener of SDA Professionals Pillar. He's a chartered accountant by training. He's very passionate about financial literacy. And unfortunately for the single ladies, he is married and has 2 children. All right, Brother Xolani, I will hand over to you, my brother.
All right. Being married is fortunate, but yeah, okay. I greet you all in the lovely name of Jesus, and I'm so glad that we could meet together like this. I look forward to a fruitful discussion. I know they've chosen an interesting topic, so let's hope we'll learn from that. We'll all contribute. So the way we'll approach this is, I'll say a few things maybe for a couple of minutes, and then maybe 30 to 40 minutes, and then we're gonna have a question and answer session. I think we'll learn more from discussion, and to be quite honest, any question around personal finance is allowed. Any opinion, any comment, all of that is allowed, and we'll see how far we can take this. And of course, I'll be guided by the leaders on when to stop. I'm gonna put an alarm here for myself to stop presenting, but they will then tell us how long are we gonna have the question and answer session. They will time us on that. All right, so let me put on that. There we go. So I was told that we're gonna have a discussion on personal finance with young people, and youth really is anything from children to these days people who are 40, they call themselves young. So everybody is welcome, and we'll have that kind of discussion. Now, it's not the first time that we've met together. I mean, I think I've been to your church, and we shared a few thoughts on personal finance. So I'm not going to repeat a lot of those things, but I hope we'll have a good time together. And maybe just to just give an emphasis when it comes to personal finance, it's okay for us to discuss it in a church setup. I'm sure I don't have to say that because we've come here to discuss finances, but sometimes there's always somebody who pops in and is like, why are we talking about money in church? Except when we are just collecting it, but it's okay to also talk about where the money collected is coming from, how do we manage it. In fact, when you read Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 18 to 19, one of the gifts that we get from God is that one of generating wealth. And the Bible says that if you start thinking to yourself that all this wealth that generated from our own strength, think again, it is God who gives you the ability to generate wealth. One of the things we know about God is that each of the gifts that he gives, he also gives an instruction and direction on how to handle it. You can think of children, which are a gift from God. We are told how to handle them. Spouses, we are told how to relate with each other. Even the greatest gift of them all, the gift of his son, we are told that whosoever believeth may have life eternal. We are told how to relate to the Son of God. So it doesn't then change when it comes to finances, where God just gives us the ability to generate wealth, blesses us, but only talks to us when he wants us to return tithe. And it reminds me of the smash and grab. You know, when someone just smashes your budget, grabs the tithe, and then that is not the God we serve. And we'll talk about some of those things, specifically as it pertains to young people, young adults, some of the priorities that we must have. For those who want to be comfortable, there's really over 2,000 verses in the Bible that talk about money, and not all of them are talking about tithe and offering. And yes, you know, so we can be comfortable discussing that. If you find time, you can go through the tithe, the parables of Jesus. You'll actually find that 66% of those parables, 2/3, they're about money, possessions, and wealth, you know. So really, God has given us so much guidance that by the time he asks us to return tithe, by the time he asks us to make offering, his biddings are his enablings. That bidding to return tithe has already come with power to generate the wealth from whence tithe comes. And therefore, I'd like us to focus a little bit that as young people, really what should be our priorities. And you know, people who are younger than us, I mean, are really, as far as I'm concerned, they are really fortunate. I'm 36, and I wish there are some things that I'm starting to learn now that I wish I learned when I was 20, when I just gotten off varsity, you know. And I wish that you know, you guys can really embrace these things. And of course, there are some amongst us who are a bit older than 20, Madonsela, and of course, we could still learn a few things that we should have learned. It's never too late to correct your ways, especially when it comes to what God expects of us. And we know that even the thief that was hanging on the cross, it was never too late. Some of us are hanging on the cross of poor financial management. It's not too late to look and be saved. So all of us are accommodated in this discussion, right? And of course, I want to just start by you know, as young people, you know, when we think about money, many of us, even us who've started working, those who have business, every now and then you've heard someone say, if I could just have a little bit more money, and they get promoted, their business does well, but their problems also get promoted and they do well. You then start to realize that most of our money problems don't just have to do with money, because money, after all, is just a piece of paper, a plastic, or a program for those who are using cryptocurrency. But what really, money is just a means to an end. What really is important is the end. What money gets us. That's really what we really struggle with, you know. Money represents, for example, security for some people. You know, I can live in a secured home. Money represents, for some it represents status. So how I think about status may give me a clue on how am I going to relate with money. And some of us really, because of our thinking around status and many things that we believe money gets us, we go overboard and end up in debt. So really, money, really, what's important about money is how we relate to what money gets us. And of course, that's why, you know, I always say that money is a tool. And if you don't know how to use a tool, if you, you know, those who don't read manuals, you know, you just buy a car. I also have never read a manual for a car. But when you don't know how to use a tool, it has a tendency of hurting you. And many of us, young adult people, have been hurt about money. And we are normally not very honest about the bad experiences we've had with money, because we are worried that people will lose respect of us. So it then means that sometimes younger people who have not yet made certain mistakes don't get the benefit of being told the truth about the mistakes older people have made, because the older people are worried that we will lose respect for them. And therefore, we hardly have honest conversations about money, and we are left to make our own opinions around money. And we really grow up experimenting. You know, you'll be surprised also to discover that even chartered accountants, by the way, or finance people, except for those who actually study financial planning, most people who are in the finance field are normally taught how to handle and comment and analyze other people's money. Yes, they've got the tools to make decisions about their own money, but there isn't much of a curriculum that focuses on how to manage your own money. And therefore, you find many people with finance degrees really messing it up when it comes to money, making very silly decisions when it comes to money. How much more than somebody who did geography? But we are not there. You know, geography is the study of Earth's surface. It's a wonderful thing to have. All I'm just saying is that those who are trained around finances, they struggle themselves. One of the things that we will also discover as we grow and we start handling money is that I really think we are a bit too hard on ourselves, okay? We are too hard on ourselves. We put more expectations than what reality, our financial realities are, and it really gets us into a whole lot of problems. For example, many of us, we look at wealthy people like these gentlemen, and of course, we start rushing the idea of appearing rich. The shows we watch, the posts, you know, I've heard that some people actually go and buy clothes and they take them, they wear them for Instagram, they take photos and they return them. We put so much pressure on ourselves to look rich, and we forget to actually be rich. And these are the things that we grapple with at every stage. You know, you'll think that peer pressure ends when we are teenagers, but actually, and peer pressure is about putting pressure on each other as peers. Adults also have peers. You find it, and they get into debt so that they can post family holidays. You find adults competing on where their children are going for school, and you know, so competition finds us at every level. We end up forgetting to be what we are looking like, and that's really and those are the things that I really want us as young people at an early age to get right in our heads. Right, and that's very important. Okay, and therefore I really want us to give ourselves some time, and also understand that building wealth takes time. It takes time. And I'll encourage you to go and just Google, even some of these guys that I've put up here. Just Google how long it took them to become millionaires. You know, you're gonna find 10 years. You're gonna find. I know that. I think Mark took him. It took him a very short while. Mark Zuckerberg. I'm saying Mark like it's a friend of mine. No, Mark Zuckerberg, low way Facebook. It took him, I think, 4 or 5 years or something like that. There are some that it takes them a shorter time, but most of the millionaires take a while to do this. But many of us, we easily put ourselves under pressure, simply because we've seen people who look like, but they are not. In fact, if you were to go and there's a research, because of time, I'm not going to go through a lot of research that's there. There's a report that comes out every year. It's a report on high net worth individuals. These are people whose net wealth, by the way, I'm going to repeat this thing of what wealth is so that we drum it in our head, what wealth is and what is not. Wealth happens when what I own, assets, what I own is bigger than what I owe. And one of the things that has been discovered when you read this report is that the average age of high net worth individuals is 57. 57. Now, unfortunately, we put ourselves under so much pressure that we want to achieve what 57-year-olds have achieved at 30, at 25. But then we want to achieve it with too much debt. Yet wealth happens when I accumulate a lot of assets more than the debts. And really, those are the things that I want to talk about. And of course, in these statistics, there are some young people who do different things. They start businesses. We'll talk a little bit around that. And they obviously fast track their wealth. So that's also important to talk about. And of course, we then have a different attitude towards debt once we understand how wealth is built. Okay, so I'm not going to dwell too much on that. And one of the things again that we struggle with, whether as young people or as old people, is competition. And competition works quite well at times when we are competing on our marks and we are motivated to do better in school. But it starts getting a little bit dangerous when we start competing when we are older, but competing with different instruments that are not the same. And competition works. I mean, if you think about businesses, they thrive and grow because of competition. So it's not always a bad thing. But the problem is, what are we competing on, right? And many of us, obviously, we bump into each other in spaces of consumption. We bump into each other on Facebook where we're showing consumption. We bump into each other in malls where we are really competing. We are seeing products of consumption. But we hardly bump into each other in spaces of production where actually people are producing because they've got businesses. People are producing because they're working hard for their money so that they can consume. So we easily then fall into the trap of competing on consumption, but not competing on production. And I will then urge, if you were to look at the different mindset between those who build wealth and those who don't build wealth, is that those who build wealth produce very richly as much as they consume very richly. Yet those who don't work hard on building wealth, they only consume richly. And therefore we bump into each other in these spaces of consumption and we measure each other on products of consumption rather than products of production. And products of consumption don't only get acquired through wealth, they can also be acquired through debt. And therefore, we then end up accumulating more debt so that we can be competitive at consumption level. It would be so nice to learn at an early age to produce and then consume. Remember, we are not saying don't consume, but we're saying produce and then consume out of the fruits of production. And if we could learn to compete around that, probably we'll be quite better. And then the other thing that we don't realize is that sometimes we are not on the same path even with our peers. Yes, we get into the working world. First of all, we were at tertiary. I remember when we were at tertiary, I mean, there were kids who were driving beautiful cars at tertiary. Remember that for some of the kids, when they were going to private school, their parents were already paying about 100,000 rands a year just on private school without any boarding. And when they get to university, it feels so cheap because they're so used to paying 100,000. It feels so cheap that they can afford to just give them with a car. They can afford to buy them a flat, etc. And this is what we are competing with. Yet, you know, when I'm Jalose, where you are coming from, actually, you're on a student loan, but also on holidays when you are working, the money you are working for, you must send it home. The wealth that can be built is the wealth that's built by you. It's not the wealth that you inherit from your parents. Hopefully we will break that for our children. But really, again, our historic, where we are coming from, is that our people don't all have the means of production, but yet they call their peers in school as peers. But we're actually not peers. We are not peers on production, not peers on wealth. We are probably peers on being in a classroom, and that's about it. And again, we become hard on ourselves. And therefore, when we start earning income, we are comparing ourselves to people who are starting off at a better base than us, but we think we are peers, and therefore we succumb to peer pressure. Yet, economically and wealth-wise, these are not our peers. The competition is not the same. So those are the type of things that we end up competing with. For example, many of us, we start off with a very big thing that's waiting for us, which we call black tax, which is really financially taking care of the less fortunate relatives. Could be your parents, could be your siblings. And by the way, the spirit of Ubuntu tells us that umuntu ngabantu. More than the spirit of Ubuntu, as we are Christians, you read 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 8, the Bible says that a person who does not take care of his relatives is worse than a non-believer. And that's the thing. So it is a Christian principle, because I'm talking to Christian young people here, to take care of our relatives. But again, our wealth background is not the same. Again, these are the things that we have to finance with just one income. And therefore, I'm then saying that upfront, we must also learn to pace ourselves as young people and not be too hard on ourselves. We've got quite a lot of responsibility that lie with just one income. Of course, we know the history that got us to where we are, and I'm not going to go through the history of dispossession and things like that. These are the things that actually make us not to start off at the same time. But again, you have a duty to eliminate poverty for yourself, because remember, you want to break the cycle of poverty from where you come, right? So, but here's the tough thing. This one paycheck, when you start working, is trying to bridge a couple of generations. You are trying to fix where you are coming from, one paycheck, but you're also trying to fix where you are for yourself, because you are living in Gauteng and the cost of living is very high. But at the same time, you're also trying to make sure that the next generations, your children, your children's children, have a better future than what you are living right now. They don't have to take care of you. One income. And the point I'm making is that we've got to upfront accept that we mustn't be too hard on ourselves. There's a lot we need to do with just one income, which then brings me to the other thing, that upfront, as early as possible in your career, in your youth, in your business, you need to really start realizing that one income is not enough for what you want to achieve, given our background. And therefore, it becomes then important upfront to, in terms of our thinking, and I'm starting with our thinking first around wealth and painting our bleak reality. Upfront, we need to start realizing that one source of income is not enough. And I'll share a few verses that really talk about that. By the way, I'm not going to have a verse for everything. I mean, the interest rate of South Africa is not covered in the spirit of prophecy. So they will use common sense. But the point I'm making is that we want to apply these things, right? But here's the other thing, and I'm just giving an introduction, the backdrop of, we are busy trying to build wealth. We're building wealth so that we can make a difference in our lives and the lives of others. Wealth becomes a tool for that, right? Churches are asking for offerings. They're asking us to do great, wonderful things. Those things come from wealth. They come from wealth. So we can't shy away from talking about wealth. But here's the other problem that we have, is that our brains are also very lazy, right? So even the way we think about finances, we are using lazy brains, and we are not even aware of that. And I'll encourage you to do some study on just how minds work. You can read Mind, Character, and Personality from Ellen White. You can read a lot of books. There's Daniel Cohen, who's written some good work there. We can talk about those. Now, what then I want us to talk about is to then say, given the background of the economy that we are in, which, by the way, is not going to absorb all of us as far as jobs are concerned. That's why some of us will need to really start businesses, but not all businesses are going to succeed. That's a backdrop of that. Given the backdrop that already many of us, when we start earning some money, we are starting off at a negative because of where we come from. And this one income that you have, if you're only thinking about a salary from a job, is really supposed to stretch amongst many priorities. It then becomes important that we at least have some understanding around what should be our priorities at each level of our growth, as in our 20s, etc., etc. I want to talk a little bit around that, and then we can have a discussion on how do these priorities work. So I'm not going to tell you how insurance works, how this, and we can do it later, or we can do it through the questions and answers. But I want to just paint a picture of what should we prioritize, because you see, when it comes to how things work, I think you guys can read books and figure those things out. But there are so many things that we need to prioritize with very limited resources. And that's really why I want to focus on that and just highlight a few things. And hopefully these things will drive some kind of discussions when we have Q&A in a while, right? So let's think about when we are in our 20s. Of course, if you are still a teenager and you haven't started earning yet, what I would encourage you to do is to start thinking differently than just thinking about being an employee. Start thinking about business ideas. Start thinking about how to start a business. Start reading a lot of books that will train you to think a bit differently about money before you start handling money. And we can talk about that during Q&A if you've got people who are still teenagers, etc. Up front, I just want to say this, that there isn't one way of building wealth. I know many of us, we go to school, we're all thinking about becoming employees, but there's also an option of becoming an entrepreneur. And becoming an entrepreneur shouldn't be something that happens because we are struggling with school. You know, back in the days, we were told that people become pastors because they are struggling with school. And I think that has ended now. But my problem again is that people want to become entrepreneurs because they are struggling with school, as if it's something I do when I'm failing. But entrepreneurship could be something I start out with upfront, not because I'm struggling with anything, because I'm wanting to build wealth and I'm understanding that I can build wealth as an entrepreneur. So we mustn't look at it as a plan that I do when I fail. But there are two ways to build wealth: through becoming an employee and through becoming an entrepreneur. Of course, you can build wealth by inheriting and winning the lotteries and all those things, but that's not where I'm at. Now, if you think about the wealth formula, when I'm building wealth using a salary, it means that I need to go and work for somebody. And when I work for somebody, they pay me a fee. And I must make sure that I don't spend too much of whatever they are paying me. I leave some so that I can then start investing and build wealth. So in other words, for me to build wealth, I must take from this very limited salary and try and save some of it so that I can redirect it to buying investment. That is the formula for building wealth. Now, if you think about somebody who starts a business, their formula for building wealth is that, one, they must start a business, there must be a business idea, etc. All those things will go through them, but also then they must build a business, and this business will then generate income. So the income is generated by the business. They can build a product, they can build services, and that must be sold. The nice thing about the one who builds a business is that they, unlike the one who's going to be an employee normally can only work for one employer because they are limited. I mean, you are using yourself to work and you can't split yourself many times. Whereas someone who starts a business, they are using an idea or they create something that they can sell to as many as 7 billion people. Again, in other words, you almost have an unlimited supply of people who can buy from you, whereas an employee has that one, right? But again, even for the one who builds a business, they have to then make sure that they don't use up all the profits. And I've seen business people who take all the profit and they go and buy a Range Rover, who take all the profit and they go and pay themselves. No, you use some of that profit and you distribute it to those who own the business, but then you also take some of the profit and you say, let me expand the business so that it can make more money, right? So again, even for a business person, financial management is important, because sometimes we think, once I'm an entrepreneur, I don't need to budget because I'm rich. No, that's the quickest way to become poor, is not to budget, not to plan, not to retain some of your income, some of your profit to reinvest in the business and get some returns. Even business people must invest. So all of us must invest. It's quite interesting that, if you look at the Bible, and just to emphasize that even in our 20s, if we start early thinking about, how can I generate even more income than just one salary, right? And the Bible, if you read Ecclesiastes, I always struggle with the pronunciation, 11 verse 2, it says, invest in 7 ventures. It's talking about multiple income streams. In fact, when you look at creation, Genesis 2 verse 10 to 14, even the way the world was created, I mean, the river in Eden had 4 streams, the whole idea. And you can ask any parent, if they are honest, 1 income or 2 income, if they are 2 parents, are not enough to sustain life, especially in Gauteng, right? These are the kind of streams that we could look at. We can discuss them as we go. Some are passive, some are active. We can discuss them as we go. But I'm just planting the idea, right? But here's the thing, if you think about how you when you were in high school, when you were choosing what to study, and you were thinking, obviously you were thinking about being an employee, you hopefully you looked at what you are good at, and then that's how you chose what you're going to study, hopefully. If not, one day we must talk about career guidance. There are people on this Zoom who are very gifted in taking us through how we think about careers and our talent, right? Because you understood that what I'm talented in will make things a bit easier for me. If I'm not good in numbers, probably I should step away from pure maths and all these other things, etc. So we've already kind of understood that a person's gift really makes things a bit easier. But the Bible had already told us that in Proverbs 18 verse 16. It says this: a person's gift makes room for him. Even when it comes to building more multiple streams of income. Yes, I've got a salary, I've got a job that I've studied for, but guess what? There are other things that I'm good at. That's a clue of the things that I could start using to create room for additional streams of income. The other thing that all of us have, by the way, is time. Do you know that an average person, I'm talking about the time we spend watching TV. So if you think about someone who's employed, they probably will work 8 hours. Those who work a bit harder may work 10 hours, but it's still another 14 hours. 3 of which every day we are spending in front of the TV, to be honest, and probably even more time for those who love sports, except for Kaizer Chiefs fans, even more time for those who like social media. The amount of time we spend, by the time we are 65, we would have spent 9 years in front of a TV. 9 years. Now this tells me, and 9 years, by the way, is equivalent to a PhD, a bachelor's degree, a master's, and a PhD spent in front of a TV. This then tells me that I do have a resource called time to then invest that time instead of spending it to finding other streams of income, so that I'm like a river of Eden that had 4 streams, something like that. These are the things that I'm talking about to say in our 20s, instead of finding more time to find a spouse, you can't afford a spouse, just hang in there. Wait a minute. Can you find something else that generates income with your time? It could be tutoring and getting a few, because you already know a few things. That's why you went to school. It could be network sales. It could be all those things that we could do with our time. We already understand the concept of selling our time and our skills for a fee. We are doing that from 8 to 5. Then can I do that after hours? We are able to do that so that you can generate some income. Or you could spend the time coming up with business ideas, because these take time to work through, right? Instead of spending time sleeping, etc. In fact, I did a quick calculation of how an average person spends their time. We spend an hour on commuting, we spend an hour on self-care. I know there are some, we shower, some probably spend 2 hours, I don't know. This I'm talking about people who also bath at night. Right. Okay, self-care, eating, sleeping, 8 hours sleeping, that's a lot of time. 3 hours watching TV, and that's our 24 hours, by the way, spent. On weekdays, on weekends, it's even worse. We are at church, etc., etc. If you were to just twist a few things, reduce some time that you spend on TV, reduce some time on social media. I put an app the other day, I think it's app detox, because I thought I'm very good with my time. And I realized I spend so much time on social media, checking in, checking out, checking in, checking out. It adds up, right? Okay, but here's the thing. If you were to cut off some time, because somebody said, if you were to shave off some time, right? Look at this person here. They shaved off a few hours on their sleep. They are now sleeping 6 hours. By the way, if you spend less time watching TV before you sleep, you'll have more quality sleep in less hours, instead of the images busy playing in your head before you fall asleep. That's why you end up needing 8 hours of sleeping, right? But look at this. They went and cut out 2 hours from their sleep. They cut out an hour from watching TV, right? And they cut out, I put 6 hours of work, because we spend a lot of time on tea breaks and on social media during work hours, by the way. So we really become productive for 6 hours. I'm not talking about the hours you are at work. Some of us are not working during working hours, right? They cut out a lot of these things. They managed to come up with an additional 5 hours, which can then be used to learn, to create, to earn, to bond, whatever you can use to create. All I'm saying is that you can reallocate your time. In your 20s, you have so much time that you can use to build. We've got people we know. What if we invested our relationships to, instead of spending time gossiping and laughing at other people and talking weird things that don't add value? What if you spend time engaging on business ideas and ripping them apart until there's an idea that can generate income? I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but that's what I want to talk about. We'll come back to this for those who want to ask, how do I start rating my ideas? And these are the things that I really think in our 20s we should be spending time on, so that by the time I'm 25, I've been analyzing business ideas so that I'm ready to actually start a business. There's so much money out there that's ready for young people, young Black people. Businesses are willing to finance young Black businesses. You know, there is so much out there, but you need to spend the time building these ideas, right? I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Now, obviously, in our 20s, we probably have student loans, but we also feel good about ourselves because we've just started working. Maybe you've just started working and you are starting to earn, and you really think the world is your oyster. You think you are the best, but also you started thinking that 10,000 rands a month is a lot of money, and you are quickly discovering that it is not. But the other thing that's starting to happen, by the way, remember, you've got this lazy brain that marketers are trying to capture. Because remember, they are trying to make you a professional consumer, not a professional producer. Again, you need to decide upfront in your age. So obviously, everybody is trying to get you because it's new money and they want to get into that new money. And it's easy to follow what you found others doing. You found us with installments. You think installments are normal, right? You found us with accounts for clothing. You think they're normal. Even when you try and explain to your parents that you don't have a lot of money, that you can open an account, you qualify. So we are so into this thing of qualifying. I'm saying, if you are interested in building wealth, you gotta switch that part of your brain off, right? Now, the Bible says a lot around how do we manage debt. Now, in our 20s, most of the debt that we're gonna be tempted to get into is what we call consumption debt. This is the debt for clothing, because you are thinking that I need to look the part, right? It must show. And that's the other thing that we suffer from. Many of us, by the way, the it must show syndrome. It must show that I'm now working, and therefore I want to acquire certain clothes so that it looks like people must see I'm working. It must show. The restaurants I go to, it must show. But guess what? If you are interested in becoming a rich young ruler, you are interested in building wealth, you probably want to stay away from the debts that are showing consumption rather than showing production, right? In fact, Ellen White in Advent Psalm 393, she says this: be determined not to incur debt and deny yourself 1,000 things. Guess what? To build wealth, it's not an easy thing, right? You know, someone say, "Spiele kanjani job, spiele kanjani." Deny your things 1,000 things rather than run into debt. If you are interested in building wealth, it's gonna need sacrifice because of the background I've just given you, that you are starting off with a very hard background. Accept that. Don't be hard on yourself. Accept it. And accept that you might need to live like a student for a while so that you don't get into the curse of debt. Ellen White in Adventist Psalm, she says, getting into debt is a curse in your life. And therefore, you don't want to jump from struggling with books to struggling with the curse of debt. So avoid it as you would avoid a virus, coronavirus in this case, smallpox back then. Right. I want to remind you, wealth happens when I'm collecting assets, not when I'm collecting liabilities. And if I happen to be collecting debts, it must be debts that are buying me assets that generate enough money to pay for those debts. And those assets must remain in value bigger than the liabilities. That's the only time that I build wealth. I don't build wealth by getting into debt for clothes, unless I'm running a clothing company, okay? And therefore, the idea that it must show in my 20s that guys, let's avoid this thing of it must show, because no one is watching. No one is watching. Have you noticed that you are worried that abantu bazothini, but they are also worried which abantu bazothini. So no one is actually looking. By the way, I'm almost wrapping up for question that here's a problem. Just in November before graduation, this was your room, and we are comfortable with this thing, right? And then a smaller yana graduation, it must show, but it must show by overspending. You've just shown 3 months ago that you can sleep in a single bed. There's nothing that will break in your life if you sleep in a single bed for a little while. If you sleep in a sponge for a little while, if you sit in a camp chair for a little while, and rather save for a proper bed than go and buy it on credit. Imagine if you start off your life with what Ellen White calls a curse. You're already starting off with a curse. So in our 20s, let's continue a bit longer practicing what we've already practiced. It's living like a student. I remember when I had just graduated, I continued staying at South Point in student accommodation. They could allow us a little bit. I continued staying there. We continued using taxis for a year until we could afford to save money for a deposit for a car, until our salaries started to grow a little bit to justify having cars. It can be done. You've done it for 4 years. It's not going to hurt you to do it for another year until you are okay. Right? So that's very important. And the challenge that we have is that we judge each other's value sometimes by outward appearance, and that outward appearance is instruments of debt. Imagine, you bump into someone who's a doctor, and you say, "I no doctor, I get successful." What about Paulo? The other day, I was a few years ago. I just qualified, and I was going to give a talk at PFL High School they put together grade 11s and grade 12s who were doing accounting. So these are people who wanted to become chartered accountants. You know, when you give a talk and you can see people are taking notes and it's going very well. They're very inspired until there's a chap. This guy is still my friend on Facebook. Until there was a chap who was in grade 11 or grade 12 back then. He raises his hand and say, "Hey, brother, man, what car do you drive?" I'm a Polo back then. So I say, I saw nothing wrong. No, I drive a Polo. Man, the disappointment in their faces, it was almost like I'm a fraud, right? And that's the thing. We judge each other by instruments of debt. Yet the doctor should be judged by other things, like competence of becoming a doctor, etc. We even judge people who stay with their parents, and we say, this one is not marriage material. Usahla no ma ekhaya. And then this guy with the Adventist uniform, the navy suit and brown shoes, this guy, he's got the watch, he's got the apartment, he's got the car, all instruments of debt, and we judge it as marriage material because we are judging by debt. Then you shut and you realize you're not married in community of property, but you're married in community of debt. And of course, obviously, you wish we know Steve. By the way, Steve, and here's the thing: if you are able to stay at home a bit longer, and home is not more than 3 taxis away from work, probably you'd rather do that. There's nothing wrong with it if you are interested in building wealth. All right. So my time is up. Can I take another just 10 minutes, please? Just 10 minutes. I want to show you this thing in practice, because now I've been talking theory. I want to show you in practice, and then we can then have some questions and answers. Here are the 2 people, Zodwa and Lukuzane. 25 years. That's their age. Can you look at how they apply these things? Zodwa decided that I'm not going to go and get a clothing account. I'm going to save a bit longer. I'm going to work a little bit more so that I can save for my clothes and buy clothes cash. She did that. Sipo, no, he still continues the normal way, right? So Zodwa puts up 300 rands a month so that she can buy some clothing. She buys it on sale, etc. These are the things you should be doing so that you don't accumulate debt in your 20s, etc., etc. I want to run through. We can talk about these things a bit later, but I want to run through a few other things that are important. So in your 30s, for example, let's talk about priorities, and then we can go into some details. In your 30s, you are now in your 30s, and most of us in our 30s, we've been working for a while, and some of us are starting to have what you call families, Hopefully you didn't rush to get married when you don't have money. So some of us are starting to have families. I want to run to the 30s. Then we can have discussions around other things like losing jobs and things like that. I want to go to the 30s and just say what then becomes our priorities. There we go. 30s. Okay, right. Sorry about that. Okay, so if you are in your 30s, if you really think about it, so it's early in your career, but you've been climbing in your career. And again, it's still important to spend within your means. It's still important, by the way, to make sure that you don't get into consumption debt. So the same things that we talk about in your 20s around the debt, to say minimize consumption debt, it still applies. But many of us are already starting to think about marriage. We are trying to get married, we are dating, we want to get married, there's chemistry and everything. And we start getting into a lot of debts, whether it's debts on getting married, the wedding day. Can I say something? You know, the Bible in Luke chapter 14, Luke says this, that before you start building something, count the cost. I think if many of us were to count the cost of some of the decisions we are making, we might make different decisions. There's a lot of money that gets spent on a wedding day, which is over 3 or 4 days if you count all the traditional things, right? There's a lot of money that we spend. You have, in my culture, we have umembeso, where people can spend as much as 100,000 rands on umembeso, because we must cater, and you know everybody comes in there. After that, we go and do umabo, umabo. It's another 100,000 rands easily that you can do. After that, we want a white wedding. Again, depending on how many people you're going to have in your white wedding, it can be whether you're doing it at a venue or you're doing it at a tent. It can be as high as 200,000 to 350,000, right? And then you still want a honeymoon. You still want this and that and that and that. By the time you are done, you have spent 700,000 on a wedding, on starting a life. A whole house, 700,000 spent on a wedding. These are the things that if we don't count our cost, we easily spend them. People resign from work so they can spend on these things. And again, we start having children and they are looking cute. Children are also expensive. These are the things you want to be aware up front and then decide, you know what, let me start investing for these things and start building wealth on these things, investing on these things, living a very simple life. If I'm interested in starting a family, these are the things we need to start being aware of upfront and know that life is actually very expensive. Let me stop here. Hopefully we can have a question and answer and have some discussions. Some things I can cover as we have a discussion, because we don't have time. We don't have time. There's never enough time. I'm gonna stop here, but the idea here was really simple, that, you know, we need to start thinking differently about money from an early age. We need to start realizing that wealth is not built by accumulating debt. It is built by accumulating assets. We need to start learning to build assets much early. We need to start learning to avoid debt much early and rather live a simple life. Number 3, we need to be very clear that we mustn't be too hard on ourselves. It takes a while to build wealth. Let's not start looking like what we are not. And that's really what I wanted to share as an introduction. And then we can have some discussions on some of the different things. Sithole told me that there's a number of things that people want to ask questions around, and maybe we could just do that and have a discussion. There's always never time for these things, but I think questions normally give more meat or more soya in the discussion. So I'm going to end here and take some questions, and then we can have a discussion.
Xolani, thank you, bro. I just want to pop in some of the questions that maybe you had already raised before. I don't know if we'll be able to address them here, but I'm just going to give you anyways. Yeah. There was a scenario of umuntu who, let's say, for example, I was working, but now I've retrenched and I don't have anything, source of income. So what do I do at this time? I think bearing in mind the fact that now we are also in this 2020, this COVID, this pandemic here, and as now imali, and there seems to be a less of opportunities, if I may put it like that. What can a young person do at this time? One, okay, so this one scenario. Another scenario was, I've just graduated out of varsity, and they also want to be safe and other things. But then
sorry, they want to?
Sorry?
Say that again. They've graduated and they want to?
They want to be CAs or anything or other, whatever profession they chose. So maybe the question now is, the market doesn't seem to be that friendly. What can they do to actually manage, or rather to still live and become stable? Or maybe what means can they, I don't know how to put this question, but I'm sure you get me what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
What can they do
Yes.
to actually try and start up their lives amidst all what's happening around them? I think, okay, Nick,
all right.
One's got retrenched. I've addressed the one who just graduated. There was one more that I've forgotten, but I think I remember as you continue with those two.
Okay. So maybe let's start with the retrenchment. I'm trying to. Something is wrong with my screen, so I can't see. Okay, there we go. So I can't see the screen now. But let's start with the one who's getting retrenched or has been retrenched, right? I think one thing we must accept and not beat around the bush around is that the economy is quite tough. All right, the economy is very tough, and that means that there's not going to be many jobs available at the moment. So there's not going to be many jobs available at the moment. In fact, the queue of unemployment is going to keep growing. It's really going to keep growing. Some who have not yet been retrenched, probably their companies are busy working it out and seeing how many people should they end up retrenching, because the economy is not going to return to full capacity. In fact, if you were to go back 60 years and look at the pandemics, the pandemics that end up affecting the world economy, you get to pick up that the recovery time for the economy takes anything between 28 months and 60 months to recover where you were, right? So again, those who know things we don't know, they tell us that the recovery for this economy is going to take about 3 years at least for it to recover. But here's the other thing: the recovery of the economy is not necessarily going to create the same number of jobs and the same types of jobs that it had before, because companies are finding better ways of using technology, etc., to do certain jobs and all of that stuff. So you are finding that even the growth might be jobless. Okay, and the point I'm making, and it's not really to make people lose hope, but I'm merely saying that it might take a bit longer for you to actually get a job. What that means is that, first of all, when you get retrenched during consultation, what normally happens is that you then agree on a severance pay. Okay, so you'll get a severance pay, and usually it will be about the law says 1 week salary for every completed year. Some companies pay a bit more than that. Okay, so if we take this lady, she was getting retrenched. A severance was what? So she was getting a notice pay of 26,000, a leave pay of I think it's like 15,000 or something like that. So you get paid that. You also then get paid a severance pay, right? You get a severance pay, etc., etc. So the first thing, obviously, that becomes important before you even touch your pension. But I must say that given where the market is, and pension is, if you were in a company, they were contributing to your pension every month, and it goes and sits, and it's been growing, but because of COVID, obviously, some of the returns were not that great. Okay, so you may find that it hasn't performed that well, but it's not bad. It's still there. You know, the money is still there. So normally, you normally have a choice to either cash your pension or transfer it to a preservation fund so that it gets stored there and you can access it when you are 55 at the earliest, or they allow you to access it. The preservation, you are allowed one withdrawal before you are 55. And then after that, you get no other withdrawal, right? So those are the type of things. But before you talk about pension, they normally pay you a severance pay, and they pay you your leave, they pay you your notice. And obviously, under normal circumstances, where the economy was good, you normally go and cut out your expenses to the bare minimum so that you can buy yourself time with the severance pay that you've been given. You can buy yourself time with the notice amount that you've been given, and you may need to sell a few things. So if you had a car, you are probably forced to sell it. But if it was new, you probably find that you are owing the bank something. That's the other challenge, depending on how early were you in your career, right? So again, every action you can take has a little bit of a hole that might complicate it a little bit. So I'm very much aware of that, and that's why I'm touching on those things. But one of the things you can also do is, remember, many of us, over and above cutting our expenses, to say, you know what, let me cut the expenses that I don't need. Many of us, these retrenchments and things like that, they normally find us with a lot of debt, whether you were having a clothing account, you were having a personal loan, no, you had some installments that you were paying. It's also wise to go back to your agreement and go and read it, because most of them, when the lender, in many of them, takes out insurance, the credit life insurance that pays about 3 to 6 months when you get retrenched. So you can go and claim on that. You need to go and find out. I mean, I've heard many people who were retrenched in some of the companies I've been part of, and one of the things that they've been able to do is to go and do that, you know, and just go and present. So we'll normally write a letter that says, that confirms they've been retrenched, and there'll be the notification that went out and shows that they were affected, and then they go with that letter and they normally ask for your pay slip and bank statements and things like that, and then you go and then the insurance then covers those 3 months or whatever it is, and it covers those installments, and it buys you some time while you are reorganizing your life. That's another thing that you've got that you can do. And of course, there is UIF, which, by the way, takes a very, very, very long time. So I know that, and it doesn't normally pay you what you used to be paid. So just be careful. And it also depends how long has your employer been contributing to the UIF. That's another thing that covers you. And of course, so that's credit life, as I've been saying. And of course, your last resort then is to touch your retirement savings, especially if you find that there are no jobs. Don't touch it if you are able to find a job within say 2 or 3 months, because you are borrowing against your future. The tax is very high. Unless you've never cashed before, the first 500,000 won't be taxed, but because it's a retrenchment, it's part of it's the severance pay, etc., whatever. But normally you get taxed very high, but also you are borrowing against your future. But if the economy is so tough, really, I'd be very unrealistic to say, don't touch your retirement, just go and default and be blacklisted and all those things. But it's one thing you can touch. Even if you had transferred it to the preservation fund, you still are able to withdraw once in your lifetime, right? But you normally cash in there. I would suggest that you don't cash everything if there's some enough money. If you are able, you could work out. So for example, this lady would have gotten 236,000 in her retirement savings that would have been stored there. Remember, it didn't perform very well because of COVID, right? So there's a minus 78,000 there, right? So that's fine. So what she then do, she went and preserved it for a while and tried to find a job. She finds there are no job openings. She starts selling. She starts deciding, you know what, I need to move back home. That's another thing. It's not a bad idea to move back home, to downgrade where you are living if home is too far and too expensive, you don't have a home, etc., etc. But you start selling some of your assets, and then you then work out, how much will I need? That's what she did. She then said, how much will I need to pay off my debt? So I sell my house, I sell my car, and how much will I need to pay off my debt? Because there was still something to be paid off in the car. How much will I need to survive for 12 months? Because she realized that, you know what, the economy is so tough, I'm not going to find a job for the next 12 months. She works out all the expenses she'll need. She's moving back home, but at home you can't be there as a passenger. And she goes and cash debt, which she'll need to pay off her debts and do that, and still leave some in the preservation fund. Because remember, you also don't want to borrow everything to your future, and start and live off there so you can still go drive around, find a job, etc. etc. Some people will do that. Other people may want to start a business. If you're going to start a business, please interrogate your business plan. I know sometimes when you're just using your pension money to start a business, you don't want to be as strict as the bank would be strict. But remember, you don't want to lose all your money from a very bad business idea. Right? We can talk about that a little bit, right? Around how do you then make sure that the business ideas are strong enough for them to be financed. And one thing I would suggest is that when you are thinking of starting a business with your pension money, rather put together a proper business plan. Go and sit down with somebody who works at an IDC or etc. People who work with business plan all the time. Give it to them, let them interrogate it and criticize it. Obviously make them sign a non-disclosure agreement so they don't steal your business idea. But you rather, this is your money, you don't want to lose it because you think the future is bright. You are just using hope as a strategy. It's very, very important that you don't throw your money in things that are going to make you lose money because you have not interrogated all the things that are normally in a business plan. So that's really what I would say to somebody who's just lost their job. And even businesses is very hard these days to, especially during this economy, it's very hard. So it's really about going back home, reducing your expenses, and using some of the credit life insurances that are there. And if you must cash in your pension, budget for it before you cash it. Our brains are very lazy. We think differently about the money that comes as a lump sum than we do about the money that comes on a monthly basis. That is why in December we blow our bonuses, and then in January we want prayers. It's the laziness of the brain I was trying to talk about in the early time. So do it before you cash the money and put it as a budget. And then you asked and said that, well, you know, there's somebody who wants to be a CA as a profession, but the market is very hard and they are struggling at the moment. I am hoping that for people who've just graduated and they want to be CAs and things like that, they are not struggling with that, because audit firms are looking for article clerks, etc. I saw one yesterday. They were looking for 5 people who want to do the articles, etc., etc. So while, and here's the thing about the South African economy, right? The way it is structured, while there aren't enough jobs, there's high unemployment, there are certain skills where there are jobs, you know. So you can think of the skills in the finance, you can think about skills in engineering and IT and things like that. There's always something there, right? But maybe one of the things that you may want to do is to be willing to go on a contract, even if it's just for 6 months. Because what's happening with organizations right now is that they're a bit cautious around hiring, but many of them have a couple of vacancies that come up, especially in critical areas. I mean, I've seen some looking for accountants and things like that, but on an assignment basis, 6 months, etc. You could start there and do that, so that in the meantime you've got that until the economy recovers, and then you're able to do that. Or there are learnerships. I know that we have a very a very bad attitude when it comes to learnerships, because we see it as modern day slavery. But when there's absolutely nothing, you can get into learnerships. I've seen learners who actually end up with permanent roles because learnerships companies do get, for example, incentives on the BE side. They get incentives from the SETAs that they belong to. There are funds there that finance the learnerships, and those funds are starting to regulate how the minimum that they should pay, so that people are not paid peanuts. But when you are in organizations, there's skills development, there's things like that. Let's pick up some of those things, just so that we have something in the meantime until the economy recovers. Other than that, of course, you can start businesses, you can get into network marketing, sales, network marketing and things like that, But all I'm saying is that the economy is so tough that something is better than nothing, unfortunately. And I know that, we feel that we've studied so hard and now we must go and get a learnership that pays me 5,000 rands. Unfortunately, in the current economy, some things are a little bit tough. But it's also maybe necessary to do some research on what skills are needed by the economy. And during your learnership, you reskill yourself. Because some of us have degrees and diplomas that are not necessarily needed by the economy. And maybe instead of trying for 4 years, maybe it's time to spend that 4 years reskilling yourself. I've seen people who went and worked at Checkers with their degree and then started reskilling themselves and maybe getting into education, getting into nursing. And there's a friend of mine I grew up with. She did exactly that. She's now starting as a teacher. Of course, they are earning by sitting at home at the moment because of COVID. But she reskilled herself. She went and worked at Wimpy with a degree that the economy just couldn't accommodate. And then she studied through UNISA and started and reskilled herself after researching where is the need in the economy. Teachers were needed, health workers were needed, etc. And those are the things that she did. Unfortunately, I don't have a magic answer because the economy is not for magicians, by the way, at the moment. It's very tough. I hope I've answered.
Yeah, I'm okay with the answers, Xolani. There's 2 more questions. One question would be, sorry, just
I can't hear.
Sorry. So the one question would be, how does one save for such times? I think you've kind of covered that one slightly. With how to
not quite.
Yeah, not quite, but yeah, how can one save for such a time? Because it came through unexpected, but should it happen again, what can I do? What measures can I put in place so that I don't end up in the same place as I am this year, given COVID? So yeah, you get my question. Just let me elaborate further. You get the question.
Okay. All right. So, one of the things. Let me share. Let me share this one quickly. One of the things that and it's a good question. So already in early in our career, because you must understand one thing, that until you've built a business, until you've built wealth through investments over time, or until you become an executive and you are earning millions, you're early in your career, you have not accumulated enough wealth to respond to emergencies. And therefore, you need to live a very frugal life, so that you can use additional income to build investments, but to also prepare for emergencies. Because if your only source of income, this is why I wanted to talk a little bit about different sources of income, because this one source of income being a job also depends. Have you noticed that you do your job very well, but the company still retrenches because the decision makers were not running the company? You are not in control of that. The economy didn't go very well. So early in our careers, we need to protect this one thing that makes us money, which is our job, and we need to then prepare for the eventuality of losing that job, right? And one of those ways to do that is to build an emergency fund. An emergency fund is really, when people ask how much is enough, how much must I put aside? An emergency fund, what it is the money that will cover you when you don't have income, when you lose a job, or when your business is not working. We've seen it with businesses that had to be on shutdown and couldn't invoice and couldn't have customers for 5 months. Many shut down after 2 weeks of no customers, right? Many of us are 2 weeks away from going back home and stay in the back room. Now, when you build an emergency fund, you want to make sure that you have enough income, enough money to cover you for at least, they used to say between 3 to 6 months. But if you look at how the economy is now, you realize that it's starting to take a bit longer to find a job. So I then at times recommend between 6 to 9 months. You must have 6 to 9 months worth of your monthly expenses put aside as an emergency fund. That's number one, right? So you want to build an emergency fund that also takes care of unexpected large expenses, because sometimes your emergencies are not necessarily losing a job. It could be a tire burst that finds you in the middle of the month. Now you end up borrowing. So you want to make sure that you also put, so the minimum, let me just show you this lady, for example. The minimum that you should be putting aside, let me just see. Oh, I didn't put that in the slides. Okay, sorry about that. I'll just talk through it. So the minimum that you must have is about 6 months. Okay. So how do you work it out? Let's say your monthly expenses are 15,000 rand. So your rent and everything are 15,000 rand. You then want to make sure that you have 15,000 times 6 sitting in an emergency fund. That's number one. You also then want to make sure that you have funds that can respond to emergencies. So for example, you've got an insurance for your car, but if you have an accident, you need to have money for excess. Now, if you don't have that excess put in your emergency fund, it means you must get into debt for excess. So you want to make sure that excess is there also. So you add that money as excess. You want to make sure that if you have a house, you save enough for repairs and maintenance. If the plumbing is a problem and you have not insured for it, then it's going to get out of your pocket. Make sure you have money for that. If you have medical aid, sometimes you run out of medical aid savings and have to pay cash. Now you want to make sure that you have the cash to respond to that. So that's the emergency fund, 6 months expenses, and then also some of the large unexpected expenses put in the emergency fund. How do you build an emergency fund? You want to make sure that you put it in a place where you can easily access it. Because when an emergency happens, you don't want to have invested it in a place where you must wait 5 years before you access your money. So you normally put it in the money market, right? So for example, money market is investing in banks, you know, where you put in a notice account where you give a 7 days notice to access your money. There you don't earn a lot of returns. You normally earn about 4 to 6% that you will earn there as returns. But at the very least, it's covering some inflation, because inflation is sitting at about 4% at the moment. But also, it's not just sitting under your mattress where you just access it very easily. So that's a way to do it. Obviously, it's going to take you a bit of time to build an emergency fund over time. But that's what you do. Another way to do it, by the way, is to pay a bit more. And I caution you on this one, because obviously you get tempted, but you can also build your emergency fund if you have a bond already. And normally a bond is charging you prime or prime plus. So let's say it's charging you, prime is currently sitting at about 7.5%, right? If you have a bond, back in the days when bond was 10%, you could actually pay more on your bond so that you have an excess bond. You are saving interest of 10% or 7.5% in these days, but it's almost like you are earning that interest. And then when you have an emergency, you can go and access those funds and then deal with your emergencies. But that's how you build an emergency fund, as it were. Of course, if you have a lot of investments, then yes, those become your emergency fund, but they must be easily accessible, because emergencies, they normally need you to respond a bit faster than these waiting periods of a year or 6 months or things like that. But that's how you build an emergency fund. And really, you need to start it very early. to build that emergency fund. It might even take you 5 years to build it because it does over time. I would also advise that when you get paid a bonus, rather take a big portion of that bonus and go and throw it in your emergency fund. It can fast track the building up of the emergency fund. But really, you need to have at least 6 months of your monthly income to do that. Because if you don't do that, you're going to end up in debt.
Thank you.
Right.
I'm not sure if I missed it. I might have. I think maybe if you did, you're just gonna highlight it over. Emergency fund. Where would you best advise? What type of?
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to find. There's a slide where I talk.
But
because you're gonna break a nail and say it's an emergency.
Yeah.
So no, you mustn't put it on under the mattress. I just want to find it very quickly. Emergencies. Okay, I can't find it now. Okay, there. I wanna just find something quickly for you on emergencies, then I'll tell you. So you put it in where it's easily accessible. I think I covered it a little bit, but I was saying you put it where it's easily accessible. So normally your money market, like we're in a bank, notice account, call account, those kind of account. That's where you put it rather than putting it in under your mattress, right? But you also don't want to put it where it's so hard to access it. So that's what I was then saying. So banks normally give those. But here's the thing. So let's say let me just give you a quick example. So this lady, her monthly expenses are about, if she were be without a job, because remember again, your expenses are going to be different. When you have an emergency, you're probably not going to have a helper or carry lunch to work. There's no job, so she's going to need about 16,800 per month, right? She's decided to say, you know what, I want to build an emergency fund that has 4 months. And I also want to take care of my tires, those big expenses that I spoke about, right? And my house repairs and things like that. So the emergency fund that she needs, because she's decided on 4 months, is 88,000. That's how much she needs to build, right? You don't want to put it where it's very risky. So you don't want to build an emergency fund by investing in shares, because shares are too risky. They perform very well in a long term, not in a short term. You'll go there to try and access your shares, and you find the MTN has messed up in Nigeria. The share price is low, right? So you want to build it in these the man notice account. So these are some of the examples where, like a 60-day notice account, a 7-day notice account. You can open those with your bank. You can open those with investment houses. They've got money market accounts that they've got, like your Ellen Gray, no Banbani, to name a few. But here's the problem. It takes a while to build this thing, right? So you need to invest this money. That's why I'm saying that some of your bonuses can be used for that. So Zodwa here wanted needed an emergency fund that will build the 85,000. But remember, if you're gonna take a while to build it, that amount increases because Amakosta they increase by inflation. So if she wanted to build it over 12 months, she will need to put aside 7,000 rands a month. That's a lot of money. Maybe she can only afford 1,500, so she's going to do it over 60 months. But at least she's doing something about it. But she can fast track it by using her bonus. Remember what I said, that you could do it on your loan, which you kill 2 birds with 1 stone. That's another way to do it. But yes, those are the places you actually put to build your emergency fund. It should be in the short-term kind of investment vehicles, right? Nothing stops you from doing the other ones, but they're a bit too risky. And when the emergency happens, you may find the market is not performing.
Hello?
Sorry?
Yo.
Yeah. What else do you have?
Sure.
All right. Just meet this person.
Hello?
Okay. So another one was from Kulu. Uti, I think he wrote it on a comment. He said, I have the money in the bank. Do I pay off the house or do I invest it? There is the money in the bank.
Oh, lovely question. Lovely question. Okay. It depends. It depends, right? So remember that you are wanting to build wealth, and the question is very simple. What's your investment goal? So if your goal is long term, you probably have better investments that will perform better than the saving. Because if you put it on your loan, so let's start about putting it on your bond. When you put it on your bond is normally charging you prime. So it's charging you what? Prime is now 7.5%, right? So effectively, by putting it on your bond, you are going to earn 7.5% because that's the interest you are saving, right? So that's a 7.5%, okay? Yet, if you were to look at, so if I look at the different investments, right, that have been there, just some of the top performing, so if I look at the last, in 2019, some of the top performing investments, some of the top performing funds. I just want to find it. I had it here with me. I think the most that was there was earned about 12.5%. I just want to check what fund that was in the 2019 financial year. Of course, now we've got COVID, so it's a little bit tricky. But yeah, so it was but it was an equity investment. It earned about 12.5%. Okay. And then you had a few, like I think the Investec Equity Fund. This is really where you invest, like in a unit trust or in funds, and it's mostly invested in shares. They performed. They were doing a bit more than what you will get in your bond. But the problem is that you need to be investing for the long term. So if that money you wanted to invest it for the long term, you'll probably earn more returns in the long term than what you'd be saving on your bond. Okay, so that could be a better idea. But if you are thinking about the short term, you in the short term, the equity market does not perform very well. You are better off than paying off your bond. But if you've got other debts, so if you had like if we're talking about other debts, not the bond, because the bond that the interest is so low that there's other investments that perform better. Your money could earn better there than in your bond. But if you had like a clothing account, the clothing account could be charging you as high as 20%. I would have then said, pay off that debt first, because really there's not many investments that are gonna beat the interest you are paying there. But when it's a bond, there are some investments that may do better than that. But yeah, you just need to decide what is your investment goal. What is your goal, your financial goal? Is it short term? Is it long term? If it's long term, you're probably better off investing it than throwing it in your bond. The bond is not doing very well in terms of interest. That's my look at that. But it's a recommendation. It's not financial advice. Go and talk to a financial advisor before you take an action. But I'm just talking to you in terms of just the numbers and the fact that you are saving 7.5% interest where you could earn a bit more. Even if you were to put it in bonds, a 2-year bond of Eskom, it will still pay a bit more of Eskom or private bonds, etc. It will still pay you a bit more interest than the 7.5 you are saving on the bond, because bonds are normally prime less something or prime, whereas those ones can even give you like 8% or something like that. The bonds, even just a safe one like that, will still give you 1% more than what you will put on your bond.
Right. Thank you, Mantlwane. I think the last one was from Mukaya Skundla. What's good vehicle for emergency fund? I think you've touched on it. I don't know if he wants, do you want more on that emergency fund stuff, Kaya Skundla?
No, I've covered. I've touched on that. So the money market, even your excess bond, because it's got more interest. And the reason for that really is because it's the money that you can't afford to lose. Remember, it's supposed to deal with emergencies, and you can't afford to lose it. You want to take less risk. That's why I'm saying the money market is less risky. But also, you don't want to invest where the returns are less than inflation. That's why you need, in the money market, you want to invest in the ones that are a bit longer term. So you don't just leave it in your bank account. You want to put it where, like, the 14-day notice, things like that. Not that kind of money market that still earns a bit more than inflation, so that you don't lose the buying power of that money. But you don't want to take too much risk. That's why you don't put it in shares. Of course, shares will perform quite better, but they are too risky, and it's the money you can't afford to lose. That's why it's recommended that it becomes the money market. But never your mattress, please.
No, I very well. We hear you, sir. We hear you. Thank you, man. There are no further questions or comments that I'm seeing here on our chat section. So I'm assuming we can wrap it up. Thank you. I think whenever we need you again, we'll call on you. We know where to find you. Thank you, Xolani.
Yeah. We'll probably carry on with this because there's never enough time for this. So yeah.
No. There is actually never enough time. Sithole, can I pass it over to you again to close it off for us?
Okay. Thank you, Xolani. Siyabulela Jobe for opening up our minds. To close off this session, we shall ask Brother Chet to give us a word of prayer.
All right, let us pray. Eternal Father, who art in heaven, we are so grateful for the gift of life, Lord, and we're thanking you for this blessing that we could have had listening to your servant, Lord, teaching us about finances. Lord, I just ask that your Holy Spirit may lead us and guide us to implement what we have learned, Lord. May we not only be hearers of this word, but may we be doers, and may we share it with other friends and family. Lord, I pray now as we go to bed that you may give us a good night's rest, and until we meet tomorrow in our various meetings, give us a good night's rest. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Chet.
Thank you very much.